afternoon. Happy Monday. It is 4 o'clock. I am glad to see you. Or in this case, not see you. Oh, there's Tony. Okay. I got concerned. The only people with cameras on weren't here. All right, so let's jump and dive and do whatever else we're going to do right in. As you know, we're going to finish the anatomy of a buyer transaction today that we started on Thursday, as well as it looks like, based on timing, that we will be able to start the buyer consultation today and then work through and finish it up tomorrow so that we can then move to sellers as we almost finish our time together. How crazy, right? So we've got this week and next week, and then it's and then we're off to family reunion. So the let me just mention one thing. Let me just let some other folks into the room so that everyone can hear it. This Thursday, the 3rd of February, we will start at 4:30, not 4 o'clock. So we will go 4:30 to 6 instead of 4 to 6. That's this Thursday only. Today and tomorrow are normal times. And don't forget, tomorrow, for those of you who spend the 3 to 4 o'clock hour with Debbie Orr with regards to command, that is up for tomorrow at 3. So before we dive into our content today, I wanted to just ask a question. I wanted to see, how did the weekend go? How many listings did you take? What's the story with where are your buyers, right? Who is out there writing business? Because remember that the whole concept of us spending time together isn't to hear it all and then not implement, right? The whole idea is to hear it all and then implement so that you can be out there obtaining business, writing business, and having the closings that you desire. So what does that look like? Who had a success they want to just put on the table?
I will go, Rick.
Yes, Marcel.
Okay. This morning, I sent out an email, Tony DeCello email. I set it up last night to go out today at 6 a.m. And I get 2 responses. One of them is, oh, call this person. He might have something for Stacy, which is one of my buyers. I just saw the email. I didn't call yet, but I'm so excited.
That's spectacular. I love that. And so tell everyone what the email said. I know it was a Tony DeCello email. Tell everyone what it said.
It is an email that says, do you have a home for my client? And I say the name, I say what they are looking for, how many square footage, what price range they are shopping in. And I listed everything. I think I listed 4 or 5 buyers. I have more, but that's what I put in there. Nice. And he responds back saying that, okay, you might have something from one of my clients.
I love it. And who did you send that to, Marcel?
To my database in comments.
Brilliant.
All of them didn't go out. A few of them unsubscribed. Some of them blocked me, but I did get at least around 200 that went out today. That reached out to the client, to my database. And as of this morning, 59 email was opened. I didn't check to see how much was opened so far by now.
I love it. I love it. And so here's the, right, so that's an activity that Marcel decided to actually go and implement and starts to get some results from it. Now, will she sell a house from that one email? It remains to be seen. Well, that's not the point, right? The point is there an appointment out there? Is there somebody who is perhaps interested in doing business based on the ask, based on, hey, this is what I'm looking for, based on, hey, I could use some assistance. One of the things that I think one of the most powerful scripts that I ever used when I was still in the field was, I could use your help. Do you have a moment I could use your help? If that is hard for you to say, I like find someone to practice it with, or practice it in the mirror, or with the cat or whomever. Because when you can get really good at saying, hey, you know what, I could use some assistance, and here's what I need. People are willing to help you. You just have to ask for it. It's not a pride issue, right? Put that away, because pride is just another version of ego, right? So put that in your pocket and ask people for help. You're asking people for help. Marcella was asking for help on behalf of clients that she's a fiduciary for, right? She actually just took her job to the level that we all should be taking it, to make sure we're doing everything possible to locate properties for buyers that we have signed. Here's the important piece of what I heard Marcel say. Marcel said, I'm not sitting around waiting for a property to come on the market, to come on the MLS. Anybody using that tactic right now? Because I can tell you, if you are, it doesn't work.
Plus, you can make both sides of the transaction.
Yeah, and there's more opportunity when you're out there fishing for additional opportunity, right? So understand that, again, this is not yesterday's real estate market. And if you're not willing to do the things today that actually bring us forward, you're going to struggle. When one of the things that I heard so loudly and so clearly during the last shift, which, by the way, the last 18 months has been a shift. It just hasn't been a shift from a seller's market to a buyer's market. Like, when we think about shift, we think about slowdown, but a shift is any shift in the market, right? And so we've just all lived through a shift. We're probably about to live through another as the next 12 to 18 months approaches. However, in any shift, how you used to do business, if you're continuing to do business that way, you could be in trouble. Gary said to us in 2008, just after the fall of 2008, after all the bottom fell out and everything really started to crumble, he said, those of you with experience, be cautious, because in circumstances like this, your experience can be your handicap. And I thought, yeah, man, that is so true, right? We're used to doing things a certain way. We're used to getting the results that we got from doing things a certain way. And now all of a sudden, with a shift in the market, that is less true, right? And so we have to be aware of that and open to, okay, well, who is having wins? Who's finding opportunity? Who's taking the listings? Who's getting their buyers sold? And what are they doing? Let's just go do that. We don't have to make it hard. Let's just find out who's having the successes and go do those things, right? All righty. Anybody else? Anybody else have successes over this past weekend they want to just throw out real quick?
Last week I had gone to pay some utility bill, and there was a gentleman who handed me, well, we had a short conversation. Indian guy who was working as a manager gave me his company card, and 2 days later I write to him and send him an email introducing myself, and just said that, hey, if you know anyone who's looking for they have a real estate needs, please get in touch with me, or can we can go ahead and do something. So a day later, or same day, he sends me a email stating that his son is moving from Boston to Manhattan and looking for an agent to help with the apartment.
There you go.
So right now I'm trying to find someone. I already talked to Herm, who has Connecticut, New York license. I also reached out to Debbie to see if Debbie Ramnath. She also deals with people in New York. I don't have New York license, so I'm in the process of helping this gentleman out. And I'll keep in touch with him to see if there are some properties that might be available in Hamden. That's where he's from,
Got it.
Hamden, Connecticut.
Yeah, I love that, right? So even if you're not making contacts that directly, immediately result in a buyer or a listing, they could result in a referral, right? Remember, there's lots of different ways to make money in real estate. Are you keeping all of those options open? Are you looking at every new connection that you make as another positive opportunity to create more business, right? And then here's my other thought. Don't judge any of that, right? It's not about, oh, it's only a referral for a rental. It's about, I created an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody, talked about real estate, followed up about that opportunity, and now something that potentially puts money in my pocket has resulted from that. That's a win, right? I think sometimes we struggle with defining wins in our own businesses, right? There are more wins that come your way than you may be thinking or that you may be catching. So remember, any and all of those things are wins. A well-rounded income for the year is listings sold and buyers sold and referrals and leases. Like it's made up of all those things. So be on the lookout for all of it and be grateful for all of it. John Mendez.
Hey Rick. So I know our homework for this week was to go and reach out to people in different markets and start building up our referral network and everything.
Yeah.
So I failed that assignment, but
Oh, well, then you get muted. Hold on. Mute. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
oh yeah. But on a bright side, so I'm part of like the pivot shift community. And I wake up every morning very early anyway, so I might as well do something productive. And so I'm on there every morning, and I posted something in one of the groups, and one of the people that contribute there all the time in the comment section was like, "Hey, John, would you mind doing a seminar on this or like teaching a class on this?" And I was like, I never taught a class before, but sure, why not? And so I decided to host a seminar, and as of right now, I got a little over close to, I think, 170 agents signed up from across the country and parts of Canada right now. So I didn't make any calls, but I think I got a pretty decent size referral network that I'm going to be reaching out to in the next upcoming months and stuff. So I didn't necessarily do the homework, but I kind of found another way to go about it.
Yeah, I love that, right? And so let's use John's example of, so here's my path forward to be in touch with 150 or 170, whatever it is, real estate agents. Just make sure that seminar doesn't come and go and you haven't captured that information, right? That you've had an opportunity now to know who they are, where they're from, and have a conversation around. So it's the follow-up of all of that, right? Because if here's what I've learned. If you just rely on your striking good looks and charming personality, guess what? You just don't get the follow-up and the response that you want, right? As good looking and charming as y'all are, you just don't get the best response from that. So you've got to then take the additional steps of follow-up. Hey, it was so great to have you on the seminar. And then use the script about sending them business, and then the script about sending it back, right? So what you've done is you've kind of put your arms around a whole group of agents that you've identified. Now you have to take the follow-up steps. The only thing I will warn against is because you weren't on purpose about who those people are, you may not have a group of listing agents, right? You may not have a group of people who are in a position of sending a lot of business. So you're going to have to ferret that out. And yet I certainly don't mean to minimize what you just said. I'm just balancing it out with, let's just make sure it's as productive for you as possible. What else on that, Donna?
So I'm just going to speak on John's behalf because he's being very modest. I'm one of those agents that signed up for his class. John is very on purpose about what he's doing. He's everywhere all the time. Everyone knows him. He even has a nickname. Okay, we cannot wait. People cannot wait to partner with him and see him at family reunion, but it is because he has been consistent. He's been a contributor, and it was Ellie McIntyre, and she didn't put it in just the chat. She said it out loud. Ellie McIntyre, who's out in Maryland, who is an MREA, said, John, you got to do this. You got to teach a class for us. And we've all signed up. So he is known, but he's known because he is always there. He's always raising his hand. He's always talking. And yeah, he's charming and good looking for sure. But it's mostly because he is participating and showing up at a high level in his spot. He's not showing up and saying, I'm the most experienced agent in the room, but he has something very valuable to contribute, a skill that he's willing to share and give away. And so people will turn around. I'm in the same group. And this weekend, I got 2 referrals from that group. And I gave 4 names to people in our 2 offices, Ridgefield and Stamford, when they said, Donna, I need somebody in Grand Rapids. Donna, I need somebody in Rhode Island. Donna, I'm like, wait a minute, let me just get my phone here. This is who you should call, because we are there showing up. And it is all about being in a referral relationship.
Yeah,
And
brilliant.
I've invited everybody to be on this call, 8 a.m., pivot shift ahead, be there
Every day.
every
It's worth-
day,
It's
every
worth,
day with your hand up. Yep.
it's worth your 20 minutes. That's for certain. You should start referring referrals. You should, when people ask for who to send, you should make sure that the referral fee outbound is 30%. 25 goes back to the agent, 5 stays with you for the finder's fee. I had an agent in the Ridgefield Market Center a long time ago who was the queen of that. She would be the resource that people across the country would use, and if she didn't service it, she knew someone who did, and the referral fees would just get increased by 5%, and she would keep the 5. So she, because everyone always hears, oh, you can't refer a referral. Well, she figured it out and just kind of made like a little side business around that. I love that. James.
Hey, I finally caught up to the live Ignite here. So
I love it.
watched a lot of this last week, but yeah, just I was watching your Thursday one and got my referral agent referral network going. So that was exciting. Just picked up the phone, started calling. It was a lot easier. They asked a lot fewer questions, like you said, than they would. So just excited to get that going down the Northern Virginia area.
That's brilliant. I love that. Right. And I love what James said, right? It was easy and they didn't ask a whole ton of questions, right? Because we put it in our head that suddenly they're going to ask me something I don't have an answer to, or I won't have the right answer to, right? So nobody asked, well, have you been doing this for 20 years? Nobody asked, like, no, because when you make those phone calls and you offer to send somebody business, you dispel all of that. It all just falls away. And so then when the return comes back, you're just automatically in a relationship because you've offered outbound before asking for inbound. Brilliant. Christine.
Sorry, it took me a while to unmute. So what I did over the weekend during the freezing cold blizzard or bomb blizzard that we had, I reached out to different agents in warmer temperatures. So in Miami, in South Carolina, in Scottsdale, in California, and asked them if they had any properties that they'd like me to promote. And I promoted a great one from Miami, and actually 2 people from here are interested in the properties down there in Miami, and they're setting up Zoom calls, and hopefully I'm gonna get referrals on them.
Well, that is so smart. Did everybody hear that? It's cold and snowing here. So I'm going to reach out to people who have listings in warm climates and find them buyers. Right? So here's the other thing that I think is so brilliant about that. And it's one of the things that Christine in particular is really excellent at. And that is, here's the box that real estate agents typically play in, right? And Christine plays in that box. And then when she gets bored, she just goes and breaks out of the box and goes over here and does something over here. And then and then it snows and she goes out of the box and does something over here. And then she's going to follow up and create a new group on Facebook, and she breaks out of the box and does something awesome down here, right? So recognize that the box is great. However, there's a lot of things outside of the box. I can't quite get outside of the box. Oh, look, now I'm outside of the box. There we go. See, I'm outside of the box. I'm not quite outside of the box. Maybe I could be outside of the box. Let's try and have me be outside of the box. There we go. Now I'm outside of the box. So here is me modeling for you, literally being outside of the box. Like, and look, I see Christine from where I am. She's outside of the box.
Well done.
Now I have to get down without killing myself. I might have to turn my camera off for that one.
Take it easy.
We need
And the
someone to find
fun
a
thing
listing.
about it, Rick, is I'm getting to know other agents, but I mean, they were like, sure, oh my God. I mean, they were so excited to do it as well. So it's just easy, fun, great way to get to know other agents. And like I said, hopefully I'm getting some business from it.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I love it.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for sharing. It's always cool to hear the new exciting things that you are doing, and I'm excited to keep having you keep push and bring them back and share those ideas. So we were in the middle on Thursday when time ticked out of the anatomy of a buyer transaction, and I think we were on number 11 or 12. I put a mark in between the two, and I can't decide which one it was. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to finish that, right? And if you don't have that that document, it lives in our Google Drive for, let me grab you that link just a second. It lives in our Google Drive for Ignite materials, and it's called The Anatomy of a Buyer Transaction. So for those of you who had that ready for on Thursday, we're going to dive back into that. For those of you that did not, let me give you that link to go to grab that. Okay, that link is now in the chat so that you can grab that document. All right, so when last we met, we were having a conversation around putting together an offer, right? And one of the things that I realized when a class was over and I was driving home is that that I wanted to cover tonight is right now, the document that we're working from doesn't really talk about all of the things that you may need to do with your buyers to actually come out on top. So I thought it would be a worthwhile conversation for 10 minutes or so to just kind of run through some of the strategies that you're using to successfully get offers accepted, right? You can write offers all day long, right? But the key is to write an offer that actually gets accepted. And there are definite strategies that your colleagues and the industry are using today, with the market being the way it is, that are more successful than not. So does that make sense? Before we move forward in the anatomy of a buyer transaction, spend a little time just running through the ideas around getting those buyers' offers accepted. Because any of you who go out this weekend, I keep saying, don't just come to class and go and implement. So anyone who's going out this week or this weekend with buyers, these strategies are going to be imperative for you to be able to create success, right? And I'm going to kick it off with set proper expectations, right? The buyers have to know what's going on in the market. They have to know what they're going to be expected to do. I had a conversation with a buyer the other day who was all upset because she presented an offer with an appraisal contingency, and the sellers accepted it. And then during the attorney review process, the attorney said, well, there's an appraisal contingency in here. And they said, oh, well, we don't want that. And went back to the buyer and said, you can have the house. We love the offer. Thank you very much, but no appraisal contingency. And the buyer went bonkers about how unfair that is, and how do you expect me to waive that, and it's so dangerous, and it's this, and no one told me, and it was all lies, and it was all, oh my stars, it was like the biggest conspiracy since Who Shot JR. But the idea was clear to me. I mean, the underlying cause was clear to me. No, there wasn't a conversation around, these are the things you have to do to win. And so when that came back, it felt like this ambush to her. P.S. As I sat and explained exactly all the things that she ultimately would need to do to win, she said, well, I don't think I'm willing to do most of those. And I said, I completely understand. This is probably not the time for you to be a buyer then. I'm curious, how much time would you like to sit on the sidelines until we should be back in touch? Right, and so here's what I've learned. I've learned that a lot of agents don't have those upfront conversations because they fear that by telling it like it is, they may quote unquote lose a buyer. In that the buyers will hear what they have to do and say, oh, well, I don't think I'm willing to do those things. And now you've lost a buyer. Guys, guess what? You're going to lose them anyway. You might as well lose them before anyone wastes everybody's time, rather than going and losing 3 or 4 houses. They're ready to bang their head against the wall. You're already bloody from banging your head against the wall. But remember, it's not them. It's the expectations that we didn't set up front. So let's talk about what those things are that they can expect. What is it like out there? What strategies are you using to get buyers' offers accepted? Let's make a short list. Anybody, everybody, nobody.
Escalation clause.
Say it again, Bogdan.
Escalation clause.
So using an escalation clause, right? When sellers are willing to entertain them, because a year ago, like the answer was escalation clause, escalation clause, escalation clause. And now a lot of sellers are like, this whole escalation clause thing, I don't think I want to deal with it, right? So I've seen more of that lately. And what an escalation clause is a simple addendum that you add to your offer that says the buyer will go $5,000 over the highest verifiable offer. Sometimes you can put a cap on that. The buyer will go $10,000 over the highest verifiable offer up to a maximum of $650,000 on this $565,000 house. Right, and so that's the escalation clause idea, is that you're offering more than whoever offered the most. Where that gets tricky is that if there's multiple offers and there's more than one escalation clause, then you need a physics degree to figure out who's escalating off of who and how it's all going to go. But you know what? When you're on the buyer side, ultimately that's the listing agent and the seller's issue to kind of work it all through. Just remember that sellers don't have to accept your escalation clause if they push it back and say, please just give us a number. Right? The answer isn't no, we have a right to use an escalation clause, because the buyer absolutely has a right to use an escalation clause and the seller has a right to deny it. So if you don't want to play the way the seller wants to play, then move on to a different house. Right, so I love that. Escalation clauses. What else? What other strategies are you using to win?
Have a flexible closing date.
Yeah, Jane, I love that, right? And flexible to me in today's market means do one of two things. Either ask the listing agent exactly when the seller wants to close and use that date, or if you are unable to get that information prior to writing the offer, just write in at seller's discretion. Right? Your buyers don't necessarily have to close by a certain date. And if they do, again, they may have to figure something else out in order to win the house, or else they're not moving anyway. Right? I've had buyers say things like, well, that's very inconvenient. And the answer is, I understand. And yet those are the things that are necessary in order to win. I'm curious, can you move in with your parents for a month? Can you figure something out Should we go look at a short-term rental if the seller wants to close a little later and you want to close a little earlier? What does that look like? Well, then I have to move twice. Well, yes, that is correct. Are you willing to do that in order to win? What else? What else are you using?
Remove contingencies, inspection, loans.
Yeah, so the removal of
money down.
contingencies. Yep. Let's talk about removal of contingencies, right? So oftentimes in a normal world, right, we have an inspection contingency, we have an appraisal contingency, we have a mortgage contingency. There's all these contingencies built into the contract such that the buyer, as they go through and do their due diligence, has an opportunity to remove themselves from the contract if anything doesn't seem exactly the way they thought it was going to be. In the last 12 months, we've seen most of those contingencies go right out the window. Now, just to be clear, removing contingencies from a contract is different than not doing the things that you're removing the contingencies on. For example, removing a mortgage contingency from a contract doesn't mean the buyer can't obtain a mortgage. It's just not a contingent. So if the buyer doesn't get the mortgage, that's not, you can't wave your hand and say, sorry, I'm out. Please give me my money back. I didn't get my mortgage, because the contingency in the contract has been removed. Just like removing the contingency for inspections is not the same thing as not doing inspections. I still encourage people to do inspections. You're just going to remove the contingency in the contract such that if the inspector uncovers something, you smile and say, yeah, that's too bad. I didn't know that was there, but let's soldier on, right? Because the contingency to remove yourself from the contract no longer exists. Make sense? And appraisal is the other one, right? Appraisal is the other one. So if the property doesn't appraise, you don't get to walk away and say, oh, sorry, some random third-party person doesn't think that it's worth as much as I'm willing to pay, so therefore I'm not going to buy the property. Please note that most of you have heard me say that it is my very strong opinion, and has been for almost 20 years, that appraisal issues and inspection issues are not real valid reasons for transactions to fall apart. What they are opportunities for buyers and sellers to figure it out, right? Just figure it out. Someone's going to buy the house, and the seller is going to sell at some point with some whatever. Let's just figure it out with these people and not have to go on to 6 other people in order to figure it out. Right? The only time that makes sense to me is if the only answer, the only solution to like an inspection issue is burn down the house. And I don't think I've ever come across that. Right? If the solution is just burn down the house, then I get it. We probably shouldn't have a transaction. Other than that, just figure it out. It's just a matter of time, effort, and money. And someone's going to show up and bring one or all of those things. Right? So when people say, oh my goodness, waiving those contingencies, it's so risky. I don't know, is it really that risky? Not in my estimation. Christine.
So had an inspection today. I'm representing the buyers. Big house in Weston. And the radon came back and we waived the inspection contingencies. Obviously still did the inspection. The radon came back at 27. I've never even heard, I didn't even know it could go that high. Can we now go back? How do you negotiate something like that? Or is that, I mean, it's because it's health and safety, is that customary to go back to them, or is it not?
Well, so let's break that down. What can one do? One can certainly view the contract as if it was not, as if it was still a contingency. I'll give you an example. Whenever I buy for myself, my investment properties, all of my contingencies are always waived. And simply because I couldn't say what I just said to you about figure it out and then build contracts for myself that were all full of contingencies. That would be massively hypocritical, right? And one of the reasons that listing agents, when they see my name on an offer, say, oh, you know what? Go with him because he actually closes, right? There's a difference between people who have offers accepted and people who actually get to the closing table, right? And so I had a property recently where the inspection report came back and the inspector said to me, look, Rick, I know what you buy. I know the things that you don't care about, even though I have to write them all in the report. This one has a chimney issue that it was impossible for you to see. I had to send the drone up to actually see the chimney, and it's kind of a big deal. And I'm concerned about that chimney issue, were you to purchase it and not get it fixed right away. And I said, all right, well, in your estimation, what does it cost to fix something like that? He said, I have no idea. So I went to my property manager and said, okay, well, what does it cost to fix something like this guy's describing? And he said, well, it depends. If we get up there and if it's this, it's probably $2,000. If we get up there and it's that, it's probably $6,000. I said, okay, that sounds great. And when I called the listing agent and said, so here's the thing, totally unbeknownst to us, this really massive issue that kind of exists up at the top of the house popped up. And so we'd like to be fair about it. We'd like to keep on the track of closing when the seller wants to close. We're just going to need some kind of a credit or repairs done prior to the closing. And he said, I'm pretty sure that it's a non-contingent contract. I said, no, yeah, it totally is. And yet what I'm asking is, again, I'm just looking for everybody to be fair. So, ask the question and see what comes back. And he asked the question and came back and said, well, I hope that $4,000 as a credit will work and keep us on track. And I said, thank you very much. That will work just fine. Send over the addendum and I'll sign that little sucker up. So can you ask, Christine? Yeah, absolutely. I've purchased short sales where everyone's like, oh, you can't ask the bank to do anything. Okay, well, I've asked for lots of different things to be done. They don't always come back and say yes, right? So can you ask? Sure. Might they remind you that it's not a contingency? Sure. And you can say, yes, I completely understand that. And yet the buyers would still like the sellers to know that it's an issue and contribute in some way so that we can keep moving forward. We're asking in good faith. All we're asking for is an answer in good faith.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And by the way, I love the script that includes the term good faith.
I like that.
Because it means something to some people. It won't mean something to everybody, but it does mean something to some people, right? And I think part of that is how we get some movement. Is if everyone remembers that this isn't supposed to be a contentious war. It's supposed to be a partnership. It's a transaction. It's yes, they're a buyer and a seller, but we're not on different sides of the front lines here, right? So if that helps, Donna.
So just following up on what you just said was kind of the comment I was going to make. So obviously we've talked about having the expectation setting conversation with our clients. But here's the other thing. When you're about to put in an offer, or you're interested in the house, you're thinking offer is going to be going in, it behooves you, it's in your best interest and your client's best interest for you to make friends with that agent, for you to ride in on your white horse, be the voice of sanity, offer suggestions. I mean, I have said, when I call, I'll say, so what is your plan for when you have multiple offers? I can't tell you how many times I've had the answer back, I don't have a plan. And I offer one. So this is what I've seen work. And I like, oh, well, that sounds okay. So yeah, I think by Sunday or Monday afternoon, we'll look at offers. Just make you be the one without your hair on fire in the scenario. You be the one that sounds like in a pinch. I mean, when I put an offer in, I say, here's what I want you to know. I'm here to make sure both of our clients succeed. I say, my hair doesn't catch on fire. Whatever bump we hit, we'll work out together. doing that really makes you stand out in a crowd of crazy people. And people do kind of start running around in circles. You have to manage your clients, but really try to be the best friend. I've had the same situation at a house in Woodbury where we had waived the inspection contingencies. When the inspection came up, there was a whole list of things, and it was totaling into the tens of thousands of dollars. And I sent it over to the listing agent and called her, followed with a call immediately. I said, I just want you to know I sent you the findings. You can see it's a long list. And of course, she got all nutty for a minute and said, well, you've waived everything. To which I said, yeah, no, I know. I'm just hoping you might just share it with the owners and see what they have to say about it. And they kicked in like $7,000. And so you never know where it's going to go. But, if you look like the person that's there to help, you stand out.
Yeah. Voice of sanity is what you should write down from what Donna just said, because that's the important piece of not that the rest of it wasn't important, but the highlight there, voice of sanity. Because I'm going to tell you what, at some point, it feels like all we do is talk to kooks, right? So when you're the lone voice of sanity, like someone's phone rings and like, oh, Donna Gilbert, I don't even care what she wants. Hi, please talk to me. Please tell me something positive, right? So true. All right, let's keep rolling with strategies. Carly, go ahead.
Just to add to Donna's, I actually experienced that in the past 24 hours on a short sale that I have. And I do short sales out of the goodness of my heart. And they are probably the most infuriating transactions, because it's like you're helping these people that are in distressed situations and the buyer side doesn't really care and they don't really understand. And I was dealing with this agent and he's a great guy. Like, I have that rapport with him now. So I'm able to calm him down. But initially I was like, the lowest the bank can take is, X. And he's like, well, they can shove it then. And I'm like, okay, like, if they change their mind, like, let me know, like, I hope we can figure this out. And then he's like, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And then the paperwork he submitted was, the bank would want things a certain way. So it's like, hey, this is kind of what needs to happen. Give Sean Wilder's office a call and make sure everything is, how it's supposed to be so that the bank doesn't send it back. And he's like, if they're gonna be a pain, I'm done. I don't care. My client's fine with retracting the offer. Like, we're out then. We're out. And I'm like, no. Let's calm down. Like, we can figure this out. Like, let's work together on this. It's not going to be that hard. Like, your guy wants this to flip. Like, he's finishing his next project. This seller that I'm working with is a sweet elderly woman in a nursing home. Like, let's make this work. And he just, like, every now and then he's like, oh, you're so great. Like, thank you so much. But yeah, I mean, you're going to deal with people who like fly off the railing, and then you just got to bring them back to reality. And I'm like, no, we're not going to throw it away. Let's figure it out. We already did all this work. So yeah, I mean, get prepared for stuff like that.
Voice of sanity,
Yeah.
right? Voice of sanity. What else are we doing with strategy? Yes, Jane.
I have a question. I had a case very similar to Carly's. I represented the buyer, and the seller agent was really a piece of work. And she'd called me when she knew I wasn't home. 'Cause I have two phones, cell phone, and I say I prefer my home office number. And I gave her sometimes the hours. I like to kind of schedule the phone calls with this woman. But she called when she knew I wasn't home, and she said, here's her message: Jane, good grief, you've just left me hanging. Call me, and it's like, no, I haven't, so she was difficult. But what I'm trying to get back to is, I believe this is a terrible thing to say, but
Jane, you muted yourself.
I was gesturing. So basically, I believe she kind of poisoned her client, because we had the appraisal set up, but it was a little bit into the future. It wasn't that far in the future, and that upset her. So I said, well, I'll see if I can get it sooner, but that was the best that that was done. I'll see what I can do. And she just could not be assuaged or pleased. So I did get the appraisal. Golly, it was supposed to be on a week and a half in the future. This was a while ago, but I was able to get it at the end of that week. And she canceled on me at the 11th hour. My clients don't want the appraisal. And it was so odd because, you know, I believe she made them not like us. And I think the whole point, I mean, okay, so how do you make the other, you know, befriend the other agent, fine, but how do you make the other agent calm down, make her client be everything in good faith? That was the hard part with that. It did fall through. I set up another appraisal. I said, okay, didn't want to do the appraisal. How about Monday? I'll make sure I can get that done. And I did. It was unreal. And they still didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
It was a tough situation. It was the agent, believe me.
Well, and the simple
was.
reality in those scenarios is, you know, it's a perfect example of we are always modeling behavior, right? And in a scenario where the agent on the other side is modeling contentious behavior,
Indeed.
right, it's almost impossible for the clients of that other agent, regardless of which side they're on, have to be then stronger and almost more experienced than the agent that's doing the orchestrating, because if we're modeling behavior, our clients will follow our behavior, right? And so sometimes, other than offer solutions, right, from a calm, smiley, education-based, experience-based opportunity, there's not a whole lot you can do to help them, right? Because remember, you can't change people. Right.
She was hard to reel back in. I had a guy from Long Island with a foreclosure about 3 years ago, and all he did was raise his voice and just yell. And, you know, I let him do it. And I said, well, you know, I understand where you're coming from. Next time we talk, I have a feeling it's going to go much better than it did today. I would just say stuff like that, got him back, and everything worked out. But he was tough. But this woman, she did something to her client. That was my sense. And it's too bad. It's nothing. It's the first time I've ever had that in that way. It was too bad.
Unfortunately, those kinds of things do happen, and
I couldn't reel them back
move
in.
on to the next one.
All right.
All right, guys. So we're gonna cruise forward. I want to just throw out a couple of additional strategies to make sure that you have them on your list. Right. One of those strategies is that we haven't talked about. Make the appointment for your inspection prior to submitting the offer, so that when you submit the offer, you can simply say, look, our inspector is ready to go at noon tomorrow. All you need to do is say yes to this offer. Our inspector is ready to go. We do that all the time personally. I set up a time and then say, you know, we're just waiting for the yes to be able to confirm it, and then it's good to go. And here's the other thing that we've done successfully is when we waive the the inspection contingency, we just make sure that the inspection itself is scheduled for 24 to 48 hours from the time we submit the offer, and have an expectation that we'll get a yes to be able to perform that inspection. So the inspection is done within the 5-day attorney review period. If you're using the standard 4-page contract, the inspection is now done within the attorney review period. So even though the client has waived the inspection as a contingency, within those 5 days, either party can cancel it for any reason, right? So it's kind of a way to cheat a little bit and have the inspection still matter enough that if something was that horrible and you couldn't figure it out, you could step back. So again, using some of those strategies to help the buyer be comfortable with some of the things that they have to strip away in their contracts, I have found really, really powerful. The other thing I want to be certain that we talk about that nobody has mentioned so far is pay more money. Sometimes the strategy in a market that's moving this quickly is buyers just have to recognize they have to pay more. Right? And so if they're unwilling or unable to pay more, that's when you step in to say, okay, so if what you can afford to pay is $600,000, we should probably not be looking at properties in the 575 to 625 range, right? We should be looking at properties in and around the $500,000 range, So that when you tack on the 10 or 15% that you're going to have to offer over the list price, because remember, in today's market, the list price is the minimum expectation that the seller has set. It's the starting place, not the ending place. So you help guide the buyers down to say, this is where we need to be looking so that you can remain competitive with all of the other offers that are moving up the ladder. Make sense? All righty. Any other strategies that you want to make sure that we put out there on your list?
Would that go, is that like kind of the same thing as the earnest money deposit? Putting a bigger deposit down for, you know, to show that show the sellers that you're serious about your offer?
Yeah, Jonathan, thank you for that one, because that's another one that's a really good one, right? Instead of 1%, which is reasonable and customary in our area, Gesundheit, whoever sneezed, that 1%, for me, I just turn it into 10% right at the front. I want to write the check for a bigger number so that the seller sees that I'm serious. The seller sees that I'm not afraid to put money down. The seller sees that I'm confident that I'm going to move forward with the transaction, because if I wasn't confident, I wouldn't be putting more money at risk, right? When sellers start to see, well, this person only put this much at risk, but this person is putting down this much, right? Because sellers still see that as you putting down money at risk. Whether it's truly legally at risk or not is a conversation for another day. But the idea of putting down that deposit money, that good faith down payment, strongly makes a really valid impression. Thank you, Jonathan, for that one. What else?
What if couldn't you do like inspection for buyer knowledge only, and then you still have the right to basically pull back if it's unsatisfactory inspection? Because that's what I used to do a lot of. Like where someone would do like buyer, like basically for buyer knowledge only. But if it comes back that it's a bunch of things that they don't want to fix, you can then say, hey, like, you know, this is what came back. Can we negotiate? Or they have the right to rescind their offer.
Well, that's just a contingency, right? That's an inspection contingency.
Okay. Even if you're putting for buyer knowledge only, got it.
Yeah, well, because the contingent part is they have a right to say to back out if they don't like it, right? So what you might be describing, Carly, is more semantics about how you can try and kind of get away with having a contingency sounding like a contingency.
Yeah.
Right, but that's still ultimately a contingency.
Okay. Yeah, I think it sometimes just looks better, which is why I was always doing that.
Got it. All right, so there's a couple of hands. We're going to run through them really quickly because we do have to move forward and finish the anatomy of buyer transactions. So we'll start with Lisa Donna Moses, and then we're cruising forward. And everyone's on a timer. Go.
Lisa, go.
My question is about the inspections. Two cases. One, my clients kept calling up and booking it before they put the offer in. They wouldn't get the offer. The inspector finally called me and said, Lisa, I'm losing appointments because I'm putting them in. Have your clients call once they get the offer accepted. The other attachment to that question is, in a market that's moving so quickly, they go in, they see the house, the deadline's that evening. How do you get something like that prearranged?
So I'll answer that all with one kind of big ball of answer, and that is the first thing I would do is I would pull back from having clients call and scheduling the inspections. For me, once there's an accepted offer, or beforehand, if we're using that strategy, I'm calling the inspector to arrange for the opportunity, because I do enough business with that inspector. That inspector is more than happy to book those appointments. And here's the other thing: we book the appointments when I call ahead. I say, look, I want you to, I'm very clear. I don't have an accepted offer. Pencil me in for the first available. And the second I know, I will call to confirm that. I also, when I do it, I fully expect to win, which means I'm now employing all of those other strategies to make sure that I come out on top. I'm not just doing that one strategy. I'm also willing to pay more. I'm also willing to do an escalation clause and waive the mortgage contingency and waive the appraisal and do all the other things to make my offer stand out, write the larger down payment check so that when I'm doing it, I very rarely have to call the inspector back and say, nope, it didn't work out. So does that answer the question? That's what I would do.
Well, yeah, that I understand. But I have found that a lot of my buyers are very specific on who they want to use, and I may have never even heard of them, so I have no relationship.
Yeah, I will tell you that when I was still in the field, we used the inspector that I put out. That there wasn't a question, and I understood if they liked somebody else. And again, those were conversations that we set expectations up front. By the way, here is how I work. When you work with me, we also use my team. Here is who my team consists of. This attorney, this insurance person, this mortgage person, this inspector. So I didn't run into those things because my people knew what they were getting when they said yes to me.
Okay. Oh, and just a quick kind of maybe not so funny, but when you mentioned about the house burning down, I actually did have a listing with a colleague of mine, and we were the fourth agents to go through it. And when it didn't sell, the house mysteriously did burn down. And it was investigated for arson.
Yeah, I'm sure it was an accident.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Donna.
Okay, so what I wanted to say is I put it in the chat. You can just see it there. You can ask me about executive summary later, because I didn't want this moment to pass by, Rick. What you just said, when I go in, I expect to win. If we hold on to that mindset, you're going to be ahead of the crowd. And it is an expectation that you set when you're sitting with your buyers. You do it with your sellers too, but definitely with your buyers. It's like you're hiring me. That means you're hiring me, the advice of who I'm sending you to. You're working with vendors that I have a relationship with, because I can't guarantee anybody else's result. And in this market, we need that kind of leverage. I mean, it isn't an either or and up to them. They need to work with someone else if that's how they want to run it. This is, you hired me because I can get you to the finish line. And that might sound cocky and a lot of ego, and yet it's what you need to be feeling to win in this market.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and yes, it's a level of confidence that, remember, you're always modeling behavior. So who hears that? The listing agent hears that. They know that you expect to win. That means you have confidence. You know what you're doing. That it's going to be a smoother transaction when they say yes to you, right? All of those things matter right from the beginning. The other thing that I want to highlight based on what Donna just said is too many real estate agents still, this is going to, now, please don't leave here and say, Rick said, don't listen to a word your clients say. That's not what I'm going to say. What I'm going to say is too many real estate agents take direction from the client instead of giving direction to the client. Remember, your role is to guide them through this process. Our role is not to nod our heads and say, yes, okay, yes, okay, yes, okay. You've got to be more in charge of the process, because that's what they want. That's why they hire you. If they were going to be in charge of the process, what do they need you for? You become like the person who turns on the lights and opens the door. Right, so recognize that you need that in place. The other thing to recognize is too many real estate agents, especially in a market moving as quickly as it is today, on the buy side, write up offers with hope as their main strategy. Like, let's just write this up and let's cross all our fingers this time and our toes and see what happens. Guys, that hope is not a strategy, and that's not how you win. You've got to help people recognize that there are certain activities and certain things that need to be in those offers in order for them to even make it past the first round of vetting. Or else you go through and say, okay, no, 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 oh, yes, no, 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 yes, no, yes, yes, no, no, no. And all the no's, if you're part of that initial vetting of no's, you haven't employed all of the strategies we've just talked about. It's not about let's choose which strategy works best. It's use all of them if you want to win every time, or choose not to play. That's okay. Moses.
So you said that, or your recommendation is that to go ahead and offer a higher price. How do you gauge a higher price? For instance, what I have been doing with my client is, if they are approved for, say, 400,000, I always go back and ask them, hey, look, we need to look at it well below 400,000 so that we have a way to mark it up. If there are some property that are 350, and you can go ahead and bump it up so that you don't feel a financial crunch after you close.
Right.
What would you use as a strategy to go ahead and give a higher offer?
Yeah, so two things, or maybe three things. The first thing I would do is root it in statistics, right? I would go to the MLS and see what are properties in that town in that price range over the course of the last 90 to 120 days selling at as a percentage over their asking price. Right, so you found valid comps in the last 60 to 90 days or so, generally speaking, right? So those comps are all where you're going to have numbers built in that show you the excess, if you will, and then look and see how much over asking some of these properties have gone, and kind of look at averaging some of that out, so you can go back to the client to say, generally speaking, we're seeing properties offers that are accepted, offering anywhere from 10 to 15 or 10 to 18 or 12 to 20 or whatever percent over the stated asking price. And so if you have a $350,000 house, 10% over that is $35,000. So kind of minimally to be in the game, we're now at that 385 route. And then the other thing I've always used successfully is the concept of, when you're in a multiple offer situation, you have to decide how much insurance you want to buy. And insurance is just another term for how much over the asking price, right? How much insurance do you want to buy to make sure that you come out on top? If 350 is the number and 385 is what we're saying the new number is based on the 350 asking price, based on comps and the percent over asking that has shown up in this town in this price range over the last 60 to 90 days, how much more insurance do you want to buy over that 385? Do you want to buy $5,000 of insurance or $10,000 of insurance? Do you want to buy $16,000 of insurance, because now that puts you at 401, and the people who put their house on the market at 3 something now see a 4 in front of it and have dazzled eyeballs? Right? So it's all about insurance, but I would start with statistics and then go with insurance, and then they can make their decision. The other thing I've been prone to ask is, once they finally come up with a number, to say, okay, let me ask you one last question. If I come back to you in 3 hours with news that is not that your offer has been accepted, are you going to kick yourself and say, oh, you know what, we should have pushed that extra $10,000 onto the table? I said, because I want you to remember that in a market moving this quickly, you have one shot at this. You have one shot. Buyers agents don't fall into that place of, well, we'll make the offer and then we'll see what comes back and we can always negotiate from there. That's not that, you're not entitled to that. And most sellers are not doing that, right? You best foot forward right up front. It's either a yes or a no, and then we get to make decisions from there. So I always ask that last question. Is there any additional, did you tuck something into the couch, right? Did you empty all your pockets? Is there anything else that you're going to regret not putting on the table right now? Let's get it out and put it on the table right now. If not, then great, then we'll push this forward. But if there is, if in the back of your mind you're thinking I would go 5,000 more on this, you need it right now. You need the extra $5,000 to win. Make sense? All righty. So, that was a lot of good strategies. My hope is that you have a whole lot of offers accepted using those strategies. Barbara, did you have a question, or you just did you unmute?
No, I just wanted to say I had a client in the over the summer who only wanted to put down 5%. She'd always want to put an escalation clause in, but they would only put down 5%. And we were having such a hard time with sellers because they looked at that 5% and it's like, no way. So the banks, now that they're fully vetting a lot of these lenders are fully vetting the clients beforehand. We had them write a letter with regard to the couple and what their situation is and how, their income is great. This is just their choice to have the mortgage be that high. And that was the winner.
Yeah, I love it. So sometimes you can navigate through by having a backup, right? By having it, so that's the version of figure it out, right? If the client is like, no. Here's the other thing that I've had to do personally, and I've guided many of you to do. If the clients have money and they're making choices like that, make the choice on the back end. Pay cash for the house and then do delayed financing. You have 6 months after it closes to do delayed financing. That's not considered a cash out refi, right? The rate is a smidge. And when I tell you a smidge higher, and rates are still so low that a smidge higher than historically low is still nothing, right? So you have to help people understand part of the way you win is yes, make all the decisions you want, do it on the back end, right? Get a mortgage for less and then do it on the back end. Now, again, Barbara, you figured it out. You found a way forward without having to do that, but it's another strategy to make sure that we put on the table is do what people can do, even if they don't want to do it. I just had to pay cash for something that I was not interested in paying cash for, right? For other issues. Well, actually, it was an appraisal issue, but it wasn't an appraisal price issue. It was an appraisal condition issue. That the only way around it was to cancel the loan, pay cash, we'll address the issue, and then do delayed financing on the tail end, right? So now, understandably, I'm buying very low priced investment properties, right? And I still had to kind of figure out the cash thing. When someone's buying a $700,000 house, oftentimes cash is not an answer, and yet sometimes it is, right? You have to ask the question. I'm curious, do you have the cash to cover this? I'm curious, would you consider delayed financing? Here's what that is. Let's loop the mortgage person in on that and have a conversation around that. You have to keep offering and asking questions and offering those options. Debbie Orr.
This is a perfect example of where you don't make any assumptions about your buyer. Donna's about ready to nod her head off her shoulders. I mean, no assumptions. You have to ask all those questions, all the questions, because it's amazing what's going to, people are going to shock the socks off you. I guarantee it. What they can do and what they're willing to do if they're really motivated buyers.
Well, and to Debbie's point, let's be really clear. When they hire you, you are to behave as their fiduciary. You're not to behave as their decision maker. And so just because you wouldn't do that, or you think that's a dumb idea, or you don't have the cash, or you wouldn't want to pay a slightly higher interest rate, don't project that onto the buyer. This has nothing to do with you. And with respect, it has nothing to do with all your years of brilliant experience either. What it has to do with is asking great questions to make sure the buyer knows all the options they have, and then supporting the buyer's choice about how to move forward. Right? And we trip ourselves up when we allow other stuff to cloud that. Really great points. Thank you. All right, we got to do this, buyer. We're gonna be in Ignite until May at this point. So I think I hope you love Monday, Tuesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 4 o'clock, because we're not going anywhere anytime soon at this point. I'm gonna have to cancel my trip to Orlando to stay and do Ignite, or I'll do it from there perhaps. All right, so let's dive back into the anonymous buyer transaction. It is crazy important, however. I know it's not the prescribed content, and I know sometimes it feels like a bunny trail. However, the conversation we just had for the last 45 minutes, if you don't have that information and you're not utilizing all those strategies, you are not selling houses today. So recognize that the last 45 minutes of that kind of masterminding through and listing those things out, that's how you'll win when you go out with your buyer tomorrow or on Saturday. And it's not just one, remember, it's all of them. And it starts with the consultation by setting those expectations. Whew. Oh, felt like therapy. That was good. I'm so relaxed now. Oh, I feel like I can go out and just sell a couple of buyers some houses. I love it. Hope everyone feels that way. We were on number 11, and that was all about monitoring the response from the seller, right? Make sure you're asking, hey, Debbie, when can I expect to hear back from you with an acceptance to the offer, right? That's how I ask it. When can we expect to hear back with an acceptance? Because my expectation is that we're going to be the ones you say yes to. So I'm just going to communicate that right from the start. Here's my suggestion. If that sticks in your throat, if you struggle saying that, practice it. And I'm not kidding. Say it 10 times a day. Say it to the dog, say it to the cat, say it to your spouse, say it to your kids, and they'll all look at you like, what on earth are you talking about? It doesn't matter, as long as you're saying and practicing the words. When the time comes for you to hand an offer or call the listing agent once you've emailed an offer over, it'll come out because you've practiced those words. I want you to ask for a time, and I want you to ask for a time that they'll get back to you with an acceptance. These little things make all the difference in the world. And remember, as a fiduciary, you are now, you don't just owe it to your buyers, you are legally bound to do everything that you possibly can do to make a difference so that they get a yes. Number 12, when a response comes through, take the information down and then communicate the information back to the client objectively. Please note, this is not the place for an editorial. And here's what I mean by that. I have personally witnessed agents who received information back from a listing agent for buyers of theirs, dial their buyers and say things like this. Hey, Debbie, it's Rick Scott. Man, oh man, you are not going to believe this. I just heard back from the listing agent, and these freaking people, I don't know what it is they're doing, but wait till you hear the response we got. Okay, guys, I don't know about you, but if you're always modeling behavior, why on earth would you model such Debbie Downer, down in the dumps, Eeyore style behavior to your buyers when that's what you're modeling for them? How are they supposed to respond to the response when you've already set it up as the biggest lose since like the dawn of time? So instead, the conversation is, hey, Debbie, it's Rick. We do have a response back from the sellers. I'd like to kind of go over it with you and then talk through your options. Would that be all right? Great. And then we objectively deliver the information. It looks as though they may be going with another offer at present. I'm curious. One of the things that I can do if you direct me to is to bring something different back to them. Is there anything different that you'd like to make adjustments on? I don't know that it'll change anyone's mind. And Debbie says, no, that was really the best I could do. Excellent. Understand. So we are in a backup position, and I'm curious, should we be heading out and searching for another property while we're waiting to hear about backup on that one? Get them right back on the horse, get them right back out there, keep their spirits up, on to the next one. Or, get it? Or, because I use Debbie or as my example. So, or Debbie says, well, you know what? we didn't want to have to use this one little bit of savings, but that we love that house. And we have this extra $20,000 that we really didn't want to have to use. But do you think that would make a difference? You know what, I don't know the answer to that. However, let me present that and see what we can do. Let me do that right now, however, just in case time is of the essence to get that extra thing in. And I call back and say, hey, guess what, Jane? I know you said you chose somebody else. However, the buyers are looking to offer an additional $20,000 to have the seller say yes to them. Any chance that will change the decision? And then Jane goes and talks to the sellers, and we continue to have a conversation. Maybe she comes back and says, sorry, had that been up front, had the $20,000 been in up front, that might have gone your way, but they've already said yes, and they're sticking with their, right? But it's all about objectivity. It's all about being positive and objective, not vilifying, right? Somebody told a story before, right? About the agent vilifying the other side to their own clients. It was Jane's story, right? Be careful that you're not doing that. Be careful you're not vilifying the sellers to your own buyers. How are the buyers supposed to ever, if guys, in a normal situation where there might be a little negotiation, right? Unlike today, where there's usually very little. How are the buyers supposed to trust the sellers if you come back and paint them as these horrible, terrible people, and then you happen to get a deal together? Here's why people do that. Are you interested in the psychology behind that? People do that because they are insecure around their own skills. So instead, they try and make the other people in the transaction look like the devil. Or they might make sure that the client that they represent knows it wasn't me. Trust me, I didn't do anything wrong. It was them. They made the decision. They're the bad people. It has everything to do with insecurity around the person delivering the information. So just remember, if you find yourself in a position and you start to feel like you're modeling negative behavior in a very objective scenario where you're negotiating a transaction, think on that. Remind yourself of that. What insecurity am I covering for? Because now you can kind of identify that in yourself and do some work on it so that you're not insecure about whatever it is. Maybe you need to do a little skill work on negotiation. Maybe you need to whatever, right? Doesn't make you a bad human being. It's just, remember, awareness is transformational. And so when you create that awareness around this is how I'm behaving, it allows you to go down that path to say, why am I behaving that way? How could I address that behavior and not do that any longer? Number 13, in communicating information back to your client, advise them that they always have 3 options. And those 3 options are accept, reject, and modify, right? I call that ARM. You always remind your client that they have ARM on their side. They get to say yes, they get to say no, or they get to say a modification. Now the modification, like in Debbie's scenario where she was offering that $20,000 extra after they came back and said we went in a different direction, that modification may not bring us to where we hope it brings us. And yet Debbie still has a choice to accept, reject, or modify, right? Counsel your client understanding that the goal is to be in the house. Confirm with them that that is their goal, then advise them accordingly. We talked about this earlier. Don't make assumptions about any term. One of the biggest mistakes I hear agents for buyers make is they say things like, well, I couldn't let you pay that much. Guess what? You don't have any jurisdiction over how much they pay. You're not the arbiter of their money, right? Unless you're putting your money into the transaction, well, then maybe you get to have a say. But if you're not, they get to make the choices. You get to lay out the options. Now, if someone is way, I don't even like to say that word because nowadays, like what is overpaying really mean, right? So if someone is paying way more than what at least the market appears to say is a I don't know. I struggle with words simply because of what we've all experienced in the last 12 months. However, if it seems like maybe they're paying more than they might get back if they had to sell in the next couple of years, right? Let's describe it that way. Is it your responsibility as a fiduciary to do the math and look at the scenario and show them that, hey, you know what, at these numbers, you're slightly higher than where these comps are coming in at, right? Again, doesn't make it a bad decision. It doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it anything except what I'm pointing out. Please note that if you were to need to sell in the next 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 years, if the market doesn't continue to rise, you may have a struggle hitting that number again. I'm curious, based on that information, are you still willing to do what you set out to do? And the buyer says, yeah, I want to live in that house. Awesome, let's go do it. Right? It's not you talking them out of it. It's not you having a say with how their money is spent. Because I want you to remember, you don't get a say in how their money is spent. It's their money. You just get to offer the options. Make sense? Number 15, present the information back to the listing agent again and ask when you'll get a response. So we're just kind of going through the nuts and bolts of what this looks like from a negotiation perspective, right? You continue that process until everyone is in agreement. And then, of course, a rewritten or retyped contract or offer to purchase or purchase agreement, depending on what it is you're using, is done under the new terms. Everyone signs that. Your document says everyone signs that within 24 hours. I will tell you, in a normal paced market, that made sense. In a market moving as quickly as what we're seeing today, on the buyer side, I would ask for that as immediately as possible. Right? If you get a verbal acceptance right now at 5:23, there's no reason why by 7 o'clock you can't have a signed document with electronic signing. Right? Even if people are, in God knows where, somewhere on a cruise in the middle of, the ocean, they still get it on their phones. Just push the button and sign the contract. Right? So the whole idea of we'll get you something tomorrow or it'll be 24 hours in today's market, you need to ask some questions around that and push back against that and advocate for your buyers to make sure that signatures are happening faster. Make sense? All righty. Number 19, expect and also check that the listing you have an accepted offer on is reported as under agreement. Now it's UCCTS or UC, one of the two, right? One of those two codes, under contract, continue to show, or under contract, depending on a bunch of different things. Mostly that depends, by the way. I think a lot of people are under the mistaken notion that which code you use is based on which contract form you use. That is incorrect. It has everything to do with whether the seller wants to continue to show the property. UCCTS, the seller has said, we've accepted an offer and we're still showing it to find backups. UC is used when the seller says, I'm no longer interested in showing the property. So who drives which code is used? It's a conversation between the listing agent and the seller, and then that's the code that is used. It has nothing to do with who's in contract and who's not in contract. Those are ideas from codes that we used to use 2 MLSs ago, right? That for a lot of people have just kind of been pushed forward. Those things don't mean the same things that they used to anymore. So just recognize that that's the deal. And by the way, the new MLS rules say that needs to be reported within 24 hours, right? 24 hours. So I want you to be checking to make sure that happens. Mostly because when agents see that something is under agreement, there's at least a lower likelihood that additional buyers will be brought to the table. Again, in the last couple of months, that may be less true. However, we're not just teaching you how to best practices for a fast moving market. We're teaching you best practices for this market and any market that you may experience moving forward. So again, your document says 48 hours. The new MLS rules say 24 hours. So And here's the thing, sometimes agents decide not to report it properly. You just get to be a little bit of a nudge, right? I should do a class one of these days on how to be a pest and still be liked by people, right? Because I think one of the things that I have mastered in my life is how to be enough of a pest to get the things I want done without people thinking I'm a jerk. So there is a path, right? And anyone who's been in business with me long enough knows that I'm not lying about that. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe more people think I'm a jerk than I think. So you'll have to tell me on that one. And yet there is a path forward where you get to simply make a phone call that says, hey, Debbie, it's Rick Scott. I know how crazy busy you are. And I just noticed that the property at 123 Main Street hadn't been reported as under agreement. And nowadays our clients can kind of see that on aggregator sites. And I've just been getting a lot of phone calls. So if you could just do me the favor and get that reported ASAP, that would be so awesome. I really appreciate it. Right? It's like you go overboard and kill them with kindness. You talk about how busy they are, not how we all are, but it's all about you. And when you do make those kind of phone calls, you get away with making a couple of them to make sure that, because finally by the time I'm making the third one, Debbie's like, oh my goodness, let me report this so he stops calling me. But it gets done, right? And again, you're advocating for your client. So when you advocate for your client, it's not about, I don't want to be a pest. It's about, what do I have to do on behalf of the client to make sure that their transaction stays whole? I do have to say that I did expect at least one person in the chat to say, no, Rick, no one thinks you're a jerk. And no one said that. So my feelings are now substantially hurt. No, that's not true. I don't really have feelings. So number 19, number 20. Number 20. So once everything's all in place, you're going to package that and make sure that a couple of people receive those documents, right? The documents are going to go to the buyer's attorney along with whatever down payment check is there. Your document says something different. And I apologize for that because I had every intention of rewriting this before this session and I didn't get to do it. So know now that in our organization, we no longer accept deposit checks from buyers. It was a middleman role that only ever served to confuse people and have everything be lost. So a year, maybe two ago, we moved to just have the buyers deliver that to their attorney. What that means, however, is your buyers need to have an attorney in place prior to you writing an offer, right? So don't make the mistake of thinking that you only have to get an attorney once you have a transaction. I would start making introductions between buyers and attorneys the week after you sign them as buyers, right? That's just all part of the process. Remember, you're talking to them about utilizing your team. So let's just start meeting the team. Either have your attorney reach out to them and introduce, or have them call the attorney such that there's been conversation. They know who they're going to use. They know how much it's going to cost. They've asked any questions that might need to be asked, so that when the offer is accepted, that information is just there and ready, and everyone can get into action quickly. The days of, well, now my clients are going to take a couple of days to figure out who their attorney is going to be, those days are all long gone. You don't have time for that. You have to have that in place beforehand, especially because the deposit check by state law only has 3 business days to be deposited into an escrow account. And now that we're getting it to the buyer's attorney, you need those 3 days to get it to them and have them deposited, right? It was typically faster when we were receiving them. So you need those 3 days now that we're delivering it to the attorney. And of course, you need to get a package submitted to your MCA in your market center through Command, or utilize our concierge services and deliver them to concierge, and that will be uploaded then into Command, and the MCAs will grab it that way. Number 22, you can cross out because green sheets don't exist anymore. And when you utilize our concierge services, the commission, which is now a replacement for the green sheet. So maybe what you can do is cross out the word green sheet and write in the word commission, right? Create and submit a commission in command to the MCA on the new transaction. By the way, those have to be submitted when the transaction happens, not a day and a half before the closing, right? Because we can't invoice until you submit that commission, and our invoicing process is based off of submitted commissions. And you want us to be invoicing for your transaction a couple of weeks before the closing. Of course, 23 is be prepared. Tony, I'm going to get there in a second. Be prepared. That means have all this information ready for when the offer is accepted. The buyer's attorney, as we just talked about, who the inspectors are going to be for both home inspection and septic if necessary. And as we talked about before, strategically, you may already have those appointments set. So it's just a matter of confirming those appointments once you get the acceptance. Tony D, what you got?
This is it. I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. I get a little bit confused. You're saying that if you've got a buyer who's about to make an offer on a property, they have to have an attorney already, correct?
Yes.
Because the deposit check is going to be given to their attorney.
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, and because of the way the fast pace of the market, there's just no time to waste 24 or 48 hours in having them try and get a hold of an attorney and vet somebody. Then if they don't like the person that you put them in touch with, or they, then who are we going to? So get all that done up front. I truly, when I say during the first week after they've hired you, that's one of those things that I would just put in my system. Introduce them to an attorney and then follow up to make sure that they've had a conversation there. Introduce them to their mortgage person, follow up on week 2 to make sure they've had a conversation there. Like within those first 2 weeks, have those introductions to all the players made so that when the offer is accepted, everyone's just in action, right? For a good part of my career, I was a listing agent. And on the listing side, there is nothing more important than making sure that the agent on the other side has everyone in motion from the moment the seller says yes, because time is no one's friend. I think I've said that 2 or 3 times in the last couple of days, right? Time is no one's friend in a real estate transaction. And so one of the things I would oftentimes look for is, okay, the last time I worked with that particular agent, were they on top of things? Did they move everything? Did they have, when I said who's the attorney, when I said who's the inspector, it wasn't like, well, I'm going to go check with the clients now. And like, oh, like, shoot me, please. Right? Instead, bing, bam, boom. Let's just get this done. Let's keep this rolling because I'm already on top of that. We've already had those conversations. They're ready to go. Because here's what's interesting. Buyer's agents oftentimes say the words, hey, my folks are ready to go. All right, well, then prove it. Have your stuff pre-scheduled, know who the players are. Let's not have anything gum up the works. Okay, 24. So we've kind of shortcut this process with the strategy of having these things be scheduled beforehand, the home inspection and the septic inspection. However, perhaps frankly, I don't know, after living through the last 18 months, I'm not sure many of the strategies that I've used on the buyer side are ever going to change for me. In a slower paced market, I still think I'm going to show up the way that I've been showing up as a buyer. I would encourage a lot of these strategies to just kind of stay in place. Like, why not? It just makes your buyers look stronger, right? So don't think that as the market starts to shift and perhaps slow down a little bit, that all of a sudden all these strategies just go out the window. Just make that a part of your system and don't ever look back, right? So 24 may not be necessary because you've already done that. 25, not necessary because you've already done that, right? So clearly, Debbie, do me a favor, remind me that this needs to be rewritten for a number of reasons, but it also needs to be rewritten based on new best practices, right? Based on the mastermind we just had. Because I think that this document now is almost a little misleading based on what we need to do to win in today's market. 27, Attend the home inspection. 28, attend the septic inspection. Why is it important that you're there? A couple of different reasons.
So you know what's happening.
Yeah, because you're the one who's going to be, if there's negotiations to happen after post inspections, you're the one who's going to be doing that more than likely, right? So you need to be there to know what's going on. Why else is it important that you're there?
If anything comes up, you got to manage people.
Yeah, the management of the inspection is probably the number one reason why you're there, right? Everything else becomes number two. Managing the scenario. Sometimes even the inspectors that you vet and that are your team members, sometimes they'll say something that if it's a first-time home buyer, you can see the blood start to drain out of the first-time home buyer's face, right? And they start looking around and looking at you like, okay, what did he just say? Right? That's a UV filter light on the water filtering out what? Like, what? Where does bacteria come from? But all these things that all of a sudden that they start to freak out on. So when you're there and you understand what the inspector is saying, you get to ask a question of the inspector. One of the things I've learned to do is don't challenge the people that are in front of you. Don't challenge the inspector to say, well, what is, why did you say it that way? Ask a question. Hey, Mrs. Inspector, would you mind, could you explain that kind of thoroughly? Because I think most of us haven't really heard about that kind of a tool or that kind of a system. Could you give us a little bit more information around that? Regardless of whether you know everything there is to know about that or not, right? Because now you're using your ability to help other people be winners, to help them understand from the person they've hired. If all they do is hear it from you, you could inadvertently be pushing them against the inspector. And then that report comes back and they rebel against that report and things go sideways. You want the inspector to be on their side. So sometimes it's you guiding the inspector to say the things the way they need to be said to make sure that the inspector is on their side. Or they feel that the inspector is on their side. I love it. Brett.
Just a quick question. Do you hang out while the inspector is inspecting? Do you follow them from room to room? Just curious about that.
Yep. So when you are on the buyer side, you are kind of up everybody's nose. Yes, you are there. You are following everyone around. Now, the inspector is going to take the lead and then the clients are kind of next, but you're certainly there in the pack so you can see what's going on, overhear what's going on, right? Absolutely. On the list side, just to be clear about the differences here, when you are the listing agent, you shouldn't be at the inspection. That's not a place for a listing agent to be, right? And we'll talk more about that during the anatomy of a seller transaction, because yes, just in case you were curious, there is an anatomy of a seller transaction as well. Tony.
I just have to share this. Wherever possible, either know the inspector or get something knowledge about him beforehand. I think that there's sort of a finite different type of inspector, and there's gadget inspectors, there's drama inspectors, there's budget inspectors, there's different types of inspectors. So if you're getting a referral from the office, spend some time on the phone with the inspector if possible, or ask the person who referred them to you a little bit about the inspector. Because when I first got into the business, I had a deal killed because the inspector had a PhD in inspection and he wanted to remind us all how good he was.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah, 100%. Right. So you have to vet your team, right? They don't get to serve on my team unless I vet them. Right. And if you're brand new, sometimes the way you vet them is by asking other people about them. Right. Ask your colleagues, hey, do you have experiences, or who have you vet? Who's on your team? Who do you suggest? And perhaps I could suggest them as well. Right. And then you do your own vetting, but have some background information. That's absolutely correct. I'll tell you a quick story. Debbie and I got to the point when we were listing property together where we banned somebody from our listings, and it was for a very similar reason. This person this person was just a dope. I mean, this person said things that simply weren't true. And
He guessed. at a
well,
couple-
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was like finger to the wind. It kind of seems like that, so it must be that. So let's decide that it is that. Like, oh, really? And when that thing is black mold and everyone's hair like stands up on end and everyone goes running around saying, burn the house down, it's the only cure, right? And so we got to the point where when buyer's agents would come to us and say, this is the inspector, our answer was, and again, we would have this conversation with our sellers up front, so the sellers knew that there was a certain inspector that continued to make the rounds back then. I don't believe that he continues to make the rounds today, so I will not name him. But the idea of people say, well, can you do that? Can you force the buyers to use somebody else? I can't, but the seller certainly can. And so we would just have a conversation with the seller up front to encourage them to allow us to just say no. If this person's name came up, we would simply say to the buyer's agent, unfortunately, there's been way too many negative experiences there, and the seller has decided that they'd like the buyers to choose someone different. And if the buyers chose not to do that, well, that's okay. Then they can just go buy a different house. Because guess what? It was very likely that if that inspector came and did the inspection anyway, the transaction wasn't moving forward anyway. So either way, you're not going to have these buyers, which was our conversation with the sellers. And I don't think, I mean, Debbie, maybe remind me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we ever had we had some people think that was like we had some nerve, but I don't think anybody ever said, we now won't buy the house because of that request. They just went and got a new inspector. Is that right?
Yes, correct. And I'm going to tell you, I dealt with that as recently as 2 years ago, the same name.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, that's too bad.
Rick,
Yes.
did litigation ever kind of float in the air with something like that?
Litigation.
Yeah, I
around
mean,
what, to,
maybe
for whom?
say the buyer used somebody else, something was bad, and then they blamed it because they couldn't use the initial inspector they wanted to use. So of course they point fingers.
Yeah, no, because they still got to choose. They
Okay.
they
I mean,
chose
if-
somebody else.
I mean, if you had a conversation with the seller and the seller said, okay, I don't want to use them. I don't want the buyer to use them. Pick someone else.
Right. Well, so again, my point is the buyer is still choosing someone else. So if that new person that the buyer chose does something that the buyer isn't happy about, could the buyer pursue litigation against that new inspector that they chose? Sure. The seller isn't saying you must use this inspector. The seller is saying you just can't use that one if you want to buy my house.
Right.
So then goes and makes a different choice, but the buyer is making the choice.
Understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's always about and nowadays so no, that never came up. Carly.
I actually had a $1.3 million listing fall through because of the inspectors were inaccurate on the septic. So that was like super frustrating. And we did our own inspection and it was nothing like they said. But by then the buyer had already kind of like emotionally moved on because it spooked them out. So they were kind of, they were emotionally over it, even though he was like, I will fix whatever an addition you want fixed. They had just moved on from it. But when I was in real estate school, they always said always give 3 names. So I was thinking of getting like a top 3 inspectors and giving the buyer the option. Because we were always told like, if something goes wrong, you don't want it to come back on you. You referred them, like always, I know. And I see you making a face.
Right. So let me cut you off there and simply say that what you'll never hear from me, and I completely appreciate that principles and practices, as well as some continuing education instructors, continue to push this ridiculousness out into our industry. And here's why it's ridiculous. let me ask a question. If you give 3 names and they choose one of them, didn't you give them each of those 3 names?
That's true.
So what's the difference, right? Instead, so here's the thing. In a litigious society, do you all agree that we live in a litigious society? In a litigious society, if someone wants to sue because they say you're the reason we hired this person, they're gonna sue whether you gave them 1 or 73 names, right? And so my approach is, let's, instead of saying, here's a bunch of people I think are great, take your best pick, I would rather spend the time to vet a solid team of professionals to be able to stand behind and say to people, this is the solid team of professionals that I know and trust, and I have vetted for you. I'm going to stand up for those people. And I know each of those players, and I know what their deal is. I know what kind of insurance they have. I know how they handle customer service complaints and issues, because we've had those conversations. That's what vetting is, right? We sit and have omelets together and we have a conversation around, what does it look like? How do you run your business? Because if I'm going to stand up and suggest that one of my clients use you and something happens, I need to know how you'll handle that. Do you wash your hands of it and say, sorry, you signed a piece of paper that doesn't have me responsible? Or do you stand up and say, let's talk about that. How can I fix the problem? Right. So I get that many of you have heard that 3 is the magic number. I am here to tell you from both a brokerage perspective and a coach's perspective, I just think that's the dumbest thing ever. Vet your people and stand behind your people. And allow people to use the person that you think is the best. It doesn't save you from, trust me, if you get sued, I get sued. So I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't 112% believe that it was the right path. As a matter of fact, when you get sued, sometimes you don't even get sued. Sometimes only I get sued, right? As the broker. So I would abandon ship on the, let's find 3 great people for everything and focus in on who you really believe in and use a solid vetted team. Just my thought. Because offering 1 or offering 3 or offering 73 doesn't limit your exposure. And so if that's the only reason anyone ever said to use 3, which I know that's how it's taught, it doesn't hold up. So move on from it. Just give them 1.
Okay, thank you.
Just make sure it's a vetted, powerful one, right? Don't flip through the phone book and say, oh, we'll give them that one, right? Do the research, do the work. Or else, frankly, if you don't have people vetted, I would rather you say, you know what, I don't have a ton of connections. Let me check with my colleagues. Let me check with my office, or go and find your own. I'd rather you say that. I would prefer you don't say that, but I would rather you say that than just hand out names, extra names, just because someone said give 3. Debbie.
The other thing is, it's all about communication. Make some calls to these people you are recommending, know the people that you're recommending, and have a little quiz, a little interview form for them. Now, and be clear, I'm not trying to influence your inspections. Inspections are like the big red flags. And yet everybody knows there's bedside manner and there's non-bedside manner. And I'd love to know how you approach these things and what your backup is as far as when you make a statement about something. How do you back it up? And just get some information. You get a feel for them as well.
Yeah, this piece of building your business out takes a little bit more time and effort than most people want to give it, or even think to give it, right? Which Carly, I'm glad you asked the question, because it allows us to have this conversation. It's an important one. Spend some time on that. And if you need assistance, that's why you have 599 other colleagues to kind of utilize their experiences. If you're newer to the area, if you're newer to the business, the area, I said that's so weird. If you're newer to the area or newer to the business, right, you have a team of people around you that you can utilize to help guide you down a path, right? Marlene. Marlene, I think you are muted.
What if the inspector is, booked up for a long time? The one that you like, part of your team, he's really in demand and, he doesn't have any openings for 2 months.
Yeah, so here's my answer to that. If someone doesn't have openings for 2 months, they need to have breakfast with me, because what that means is there's some growth opportunities for their business that they are missing. It's time to hire another inspector, right? That aside, what I would say is the simple answer is one of two things. First of all, have a backup yourself, right? Every once in a while, that's going to happen where your main person. So do have a backup, just in case that occurs. However, I will tell you, the inspector I use personally, he is in demand, and he's actually a Westchester inspector who does me favors by driving from Mount Kisco to Waterbury every time I buy something, right? And I have, even in the height of the market, I have never one time called or texted and said, I need you in the next 48 hours, I need you tomorrow, I need you. What can you do? Who can you cancel to make sure that I can be on your docket? Never one time did he say to me, sorry, I can't fit you in. And here's why. Because when you are the person who passes all the business to that person, you rise up in the rankings, right? So again, start to build a business where you're devoted. You wonder sometimes why you feel like you don't have enough business to get to that spot, because many of you allow the buyers to choose. So now you're not funneling business to one person to kind of rise up the rankings with that one particular person, or you've been in the, I'm going to give out 3 names mode, right? And so you're kind of diluting your power. When you start to focus in, vet that one person and become that a source of business for that person, trust me when I tell you, I know for a fact that my inspector has called someone else and said, something's come up, I can't do the inspection tomorrow, because I called and said, I need you tomorrow at 12 noon. So he canceled something and put me in instead. I paid him a little extra that time, right? So the point is, when you take that focus, some of these issues don't come up as often, because again, you rise up in the rankings, your call means more, and those issues don't pop up. And if they do, have a backup.
Right, I was a 3-namer.
Yeah. Yeah, see, and it again, another negative there is it dilutes who you're feeding business to. So that whole partnership thing that we're talking about, which gives you more power and more influence, is being diluted when you're giving out multiple names. All right, what is the time? 5:54. All right, let's just dive. Let's finish up with 29. Barbara, go ahead.
Oh, when I have a really good inspector that I really like for septics or for the house, and they haven't been able to make it in a crunch, I ask them who they would recommend. Who would they use if they couldn't use themselves? And I've gotten great referrals from that way.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's a great one, right? So use your vetted people and use who they like or who they vet, right? I would still want to make sure I knew who that person was and do a little vetting myself. And I love that idea. All right, so 29 talks about once the inspection is actually done. You know what? And so we're gonna hold 29 for first thing tomorrow. I want to give you a quick story to kind of close us out today, and that is the moral of the story. I'm going to give you the moral of the story before I tell you the story. The moral of the story is, if you don't know anything about a house, how it works, what the mechanicals are called, what they do, why they work. If you don't know that stuff, you need to learn it. And we'll talk about some opportunities for you to learn it after I tell my quick story. I was referred a buyer client once who was looking to buy a property in Weston, and these same folks will come up tomorrow too when I explain a different version of a different scenario that involved them. These folks were a referral from an agent down in Madison, Connecticut. Right, Debbie and I were still at Century 21 at that time, and one of the Century 21 agents in Brantford or Madison referred up to me her daughter and son-in-law to buy in Weston. And so throughout the course of conversation, I said to this gentleman and his wife, "Are you when are you putting the house on the market in Killingworth?" That's where they lived, and they said, we're not 100% sure, but we think as soon as we kind of are solid with what we're buying here, we'll put that on the market. Great. I said, and you know, does Dottie was the name of the agent who referred it to me. Does Dottie need anything from me, or should I be in touch with her around that, or you know? And he said, well, why would you think I'm listing the property with Dottie? And I thought, okay, like, is this a trick question? First of all, she's your mother-in-law and your mother, and she referred you to me. So I just assumed that she was handling your real estate transactions. And he looked me square in the eye and he said, you know what? I love her dearly. However, if you think I'm going to put my property on the market with someone who calls the mechanicals of a house doodads and whatchamacallits, you're nuts. That to me is not professional. And if someone ever asked her about a portion of my house that some people think is important, like the mechanicals, I can't trust that she would give a valid answer. And he wasn't kidding. That house went on the market with somebody else. Did she refer the person that put it on the market? Yes. Did they not have Thanksgiving together anymore after that? I don't know the answer to that. However, my point to you is, if houses are your business, if houses are the inventory that you stock in your store, you've got to know about your inventory. You have to understand how a house works. You have to know things about the mechanicals. You have to know stuff. Which means if you don't know anything about it, you can certainly start with Google, right? Because Google can answer pretty much anything that you need to know. Google mechanicals of a house and start to study it that way. Go on more inspections. If you're not going on inspections yourself right now, talk to some of your colleagues. See if you can just kind of tag along on one of their next inspections, so you can hear how the inspector starts talking about the mechanicals and the parts of a house. Right? You can take a CE class, right? Everyone needs CE between now and either the end of March if you're a broker, or the end of May if you're a salesperson. Find a CE class that talks about inspections and parts of a house, and that they're out there. I know they exist, right? And I'll tell you what, not only does it make you sound more like a professional, you can start using things to your advantage. Once I learned about the mechanicals of a house, I used it as a listing agent. And so when I would go and do a walkthrough at a house with a potential seller, I would always ask to see the basement. Now, some of you are thinking, doesn't every agent ask to see the basement? Nope, I learned no. I always asked to crawl into the attic. I always asked to go into the basement, and I always wanted the seller with me. And when I was in the basement, one of the things I would do is look at the heating system, and I would turn to the seller, and goodness, this worked every single time. I would turn to the seller and say, so it looks to me like you have 3 zones of heat in this house. Is that correct? And they would look at me. Well, yes, we do have 3 zones of heat. It's like how could you possibly know that? Well, how do you know that? From looking at the mechanicals in the basement.
You look how many pumps.
You just look to see how many zone valves exist, right? Because for every thermostat, there's a different zone valve. And if you don't know what a zone valve is and you don't know what it does, again, so you have to learn those kinds of things, because on the listing side, when I was in the basement asking that question, I asked it not because I didn't know the answer, because I could clearly count 1, 2, 3. I asked it because I wanted to impress the seller. I wanted to make an impression on that potential seller to say, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. He understands my house. There's a confidence level there that I'm confident in, right? All of those things come from simply knowing how a house works. It's not just a matter of helping on the buy side, you get to use it strategically on the listing side. Make sense? So one of your items of homework over the course of the next couple of days is, if you're a little shaky about parts of a house, if you don't know and someone in your house does know, well, then go downstairs and get a lesson. Go to Google, go to an inspection, right? Maybe if you want, hire an inspector to come and kind of do a once over in your house. That might be a fun thing to do, and just ask some questions around it. But again, it's a matter of getting some knowledge around what that looks like. You get most of it by doing inspections over and over and over again, because you start to hear it over and over and over again. But do spend a little time getting some foundational knowledge about those kinds of things, because it can really be massively important. All right, guys, it's 6 o'clock. Thank you so much for your time. Oh, it's 6:02. I went over. Have a great evening. I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, just by the way, we're going to talk a smidge about 2 things that are important. For those of you who are in the middle of a rebrand refresh, I'm going to announce the idea of utilizing our assistance plan. I'm going to show you the portal and explain that a little better than I did last time. And for those of you who are doing any kind of new logo or new whatever, I will talk through what that looks like in terms of getting approvals. There seems to be a lot of confusion around who you ask and what you do to get some of those approvals. So I'll be talking about that tomorrow. So do join us tomorrow at 9 o'clock. It's always a fun time. It's only about 16 or 18 minutes of your time. And we will see you bright and early tomorrow. Have a great night. Have a good dinner.
Thank you.
See you, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.